There is a neighborhood in every major American city where the houses look the same. The cars in the driveways look the same. The kids go to the same schools. And yet 20 years from now, half the people on that street will be genuinely wealthy and the other half will be working until they physically cannot anymore. Same zip code, same starting line, completely different finish. And the difference is almost never income. It is almost never luck. It is not the inheritance or the side hustle or the hot stock tip. It is a small number of specific financial behaviors that one group adopted quietly in their 30s and the other group never did because nobody showed them what those behaviors actually were or why they mattered so much more than everything else. The top 10% of American households by net worth are not smarter than you. They are not more disciplined in every area of their lives. They are not grinding 18 hours a day while you relax. In most cases, they made 7 specific money moves, some of them counterintuitive, some of them boring, all of them executable by any person watching this video right now, that separated their financial trajectory from everyone else's. This video is those 7 moves, not the obvious ones, not the ones every finance channel covers, the real ones, the ones that actually explain the gap. My name is Sig and I spend way too much time thinking about money, the specific behaviors that separate people who build real wealth from people who earn good incomes and end up with nothing to show for it, and why the gap between those two groups is almost always behavioral rather than circumstantial. Subscribe to this channel right now if you want to understand money at a level that actually changes your outcomes. And give this video a thumbs up if by the end of it you find yourself thinking about your finances differently than you did when you clicked on it. Let's get into the 7 moves. The very first thing that separates the top 10% from everyone else has nothing to do with which investments they chose or how sophisticated their portfolio is. It has to do with the decision they made before they bought anything significant. They bought time first. What does that mean? It means that before they upgraded their apartment, before they bought the newer car, before they took the expensive vacation they had been putting off, they made sure a portion of every paycheck was already working before they ever saw it. The automatic investment, the retirement contribution that comes out pre-check, the savings transfer that hits the day the paycheck arrives. They made the investment decision once and then removed themselves from the equation entirely. This is not a new idea, but most people do it backwards. They earn money, they spend money, they invest whatever is left over. The top 10% invests first and lives on whatever remains. The mathematical difference between these two approaches over a 30-year career is not marginal. It is the difference between retiring with $1 million and retiring with $200,000. The same income, the same general lifestyle, different sequence. Here is the specific move. If you are not currently automating your savings and investment contributions to leave your account on the same day your paycheck arrives, you are doing it in the order that produces the worst outcome. Change the sequence, not the amount, not yet. The sequence first, then increase the amount over time. The order matters more than the number. This is the move that sounds like basic financial literacy until you see how few people actually apply it in the decisions that matter most. An asset puts money in your pocket. A liability takes money out of your pocket. That definition came from Robert Kiyosaki, and it is the most useful financial framework most people have ever encountered, and simultaneously the one they most consistently ignore the moment they walk into a car dealership. The top 10% of wealth builders have internalized this distinction at the decision-making level, not just intellectually, behaviorally. When they are considering a large purchase, they ask one question that most people never ask: is this an asset or a liability? The new car that costs $60,000 is not an asset. It is a liability. It depreciates the moment it leaves the lot. It requires insurance, maintenance, and fuel. It takes money out of your pocket every single month without producing anything in return. The rental property that requires work and management is an asset. It produces income. It appreciates over time. It builds equity while someone else's payments pay down the mortgage. The stock portfolio is an asset. It generates returns while you sleep. The expensive watch, the designer clothing, the vacation home you use 6 weeks a year and rent out 0 weeks. These are liabilities wearing the costume of assets. Here is the uncomfortable truth about this distinction. The top 10% are not living in smaller homes or driving worse cars because they cannot afford better. Many of them absolutely can. They are making deliberate choices about which purchases produce future money and which ones consume it. And over a 20-year period, the cumulative effect of consistently choosing assets over liabilities is the entire explanation for the gap between the top 10% and everyone else at the same income level. Here is a money move that generates more wealth per hour of effort than almost anything else available to regular people, and that most people never use because of a cultural discomfort that has no rational financial basis. Negotiation. The top 10% negotiate their salaries, they negotiate their rent, they negotiate their car price, their insurance premiums, their medical bills, their contractor quotes, and their credit card interest rates. They negotiate constantly, and they feel absolutely nothing about it because they long ago disconnected the act of negotiating from any sense of embarrassment or aggression. It is just math to them. Here is the data that should make this feel urgent. Research from Carnegie Mellon found that people who negotiate their starting salary earn an average of $5,000 more per year than those who accept the first offer. Over a 40-year career, with normal raises applied to that higher base, the lifetime earnings difference from one single negotiation at one single job is over $600,000. That is the cost of not negotiating once, not over a lifetime of negotiations. Once. And yet surveys consistently show that over 50% of workers never negotiate their first salary offer, not because they do not want more money, because they are uncomfortable asking for it. The top 10% are not more comfortable asking than you are. They just decided that $600,000 is worth 3 minutes of discomfort. The move is simple. Ask for everything. For the raise, for the better rate, for the lower price. The worst answer is no, and you end up exactly where you are now. The best answer is yes, and you are materially wealthier for the rest of your life. Here is where I want to pause, because we are at the midpoint of these 7 moves, and I want to say something directly. None of the moves I have covered so far are secrets. None of them require special access or sophisticated knowledge. The reason most people do not do them is not ignorance. It is friction. Small, low-stakes friction that feels manageable to leave unresolved indefinitely. The automatic investment that you will set up next month. The negotiation you will have when the timing feels better. The distinction between assets and liabilities that you understand intellectually but have not applied to the next major purchase you are considering. The top 10% are not fundamentally different from everyone else. They are better at acting on things they know while the friction is still low, instead of waiting until the cost of inaction has been compounding for a decade. Keep that in mind for the next 4 moves, because every single one of them is executable this week if you choose to make it a priority. This is the move that separates people who earn high incomes and end up wealthy from people who earn high incomes and end up wondering where all the money went. The top 10% understand that the government's tax code is not just a set of rules for what you owe. It is a set of incentives for the behaviors the government wants to encourage, and the incentives for retirement saving, home ownership, health savings accounts, and investment are so significant that ignoring them is not just a missed opportunity. It is voluntarily handing tens of thousands of dollars to the IRS every year for no reason. Here is what this looks like in practice. The top 10% max out their tax-advantaged retirement accounts before they invest a single dollar in a taxable account. The 401k contribution limit in 2026 is $23,500 for people under 50. The IRA contribution limit is $7,000. For people eligible for an HSA, the contribution limit is $4,300 for individuals or $8,500 for families. Together, these 3 accounts alone allow you to shelter up to $35,300 annually from current taxation. Invest it in the market where it compounds without tax drag. And in the case of the Roth versions, withdraw it completely tax-free in retirement. A person in the 24% federal tax bracket who maxes all three of these accounts saves approximately $8,472 in federal taxes every single year compared to investing the same amount in a taxable account. Over 30 years, the after-tax difference in ending wealth between someone who maximizes tax-advantaged accounts and someone who does not is not a rounding error. It is hundreds of thousands of dollars. The top 10% do not do this because they have a sophisticated tax advisor. Most of them figured it out with a 30-minute internet search and then automated it. The sophistication is in the execution, not the concept. Here is the move that contradicts about 70% of personal finance advice and that I think is one of the most important things I can say on this channel. The top 10% do not build wealth primarily by cutting expenses. They build it primarily by growing income. And those two strategies have completely different ceilings. Expense cutting has a floor. You can only reduce expenses to zero. Income growth has no ceiling. A person who earns $40,000 and cuts expenses aggressively can maybe save $10,000 to $15,000 per year. A person who earns $40,000 and grows their income to $70,000 over 5 years through skill development, job changes, or additional income streams has completely changed the math of their wealth building without touching a single expense. The top 10% understand that your income is not a fixed variable. It is a lever, and they treat it like one. They invest in skills that increase their earning potential. They change jobs every 3 to 5 years because research consistently shows that people who change employers receive 15 to 20% salary increases on average, while people who stay receive 3 to 5%. They negotiate raises aggressively because they know the compounding effect of a higher salary base accumulates over decades. They build secondary income streams not because they love the grind, but because the income sources compound the primary source in ways that a single income never can. I am not telling you to abandon expense management. The gap between income and spending is what creates the money available to invest. But if your primary strategy for building that gap is finding things to cut rather than finding ways to grow the numerator, you are working the harder side of a simple equation when the easier side is right there available to you. This one is going to sound less exciting than the previous 5, and I am going to tell you why it is actually the move that makes all the others possible. The top 10% maintain a genuine emergency fund. Not a theoretical one, not a mental accounting of available credit card space, an actual liquid cash reserve of 3 to 6 months of living expenses sitting in a high-yield savings account earning real interest, untouched and inviolable except for genuine financial emergencies. The reason this matters more than most people understand is not the obvious one about covering car repairs or medical bills without going into credit card debt. The real reason is what an emergency fund does to your investment behavior during market downturns. When the stock market drops 20 or 30%, which it will do multiple times over your investing lifetime, the people without an emergency fund panic and sell. They need the money. The job loss happened or the expense came up, and the only liquid resource available is the investment account. So they sell at the bottom. They lock in the loss. They miss the recovery. Their wealth building gets set back not just by the market drop, but by the permanent loss of shares sold at the wrong time that never compound back. The people with a funded emergency fund do nothing during a market crash. They do not have to sell. They watch the number go down on the screen, and they leave it alone because their emergency fund is handling the actual emergency, and their investment account does not need to. Over a 30-year investment career, the difference between someone who sells during market downturns and someone who holds through them, attributable directly to whether they had an emergency fund that prevented forced selling, is one of the largest single contributors to the wealth gap between the top 10% and everyone else. The last move is the one that most people emotionally understand but strategically under-execute. The top 10% eliminated high-interest consumer debt before they did almost anything else, not alongside other financial goals, before them. Here is why this matters more than most people act like it does. Every dollar you carry in credit card debt at 22% interest is a dollar that needs to earn more than 22% somewhere else in your financial life to justify its existence. Nothing in a normal person's investment portfolio is 22% guaranteed. The S&P 500 averages 8% annually over long periods. High-yield savings accounts are paying around 4 to 5%. Bonds are paying around 5 to 6%. None of these come close to the guaranteed 22% return you get from paying off a credit card. The top 10% understand this math completely, and they act on it completely. They do not carry credit card balances alongside investment accounts because the math of doing so is always negative. The investment is not outrunning the debt. The debt is consuming the investment. And here is the specific behavioral difference that separates the top 10% from everyone else on this point. They do not think of debt elimination and wealth building as two separate things. They think of debt elimination as the highest returning investment available to them at any given interest rate. When the debt is gone, the money that was going to minimum payments does not disappear. It redirects into investments, into savings, into the compounding machine that was always available but was being starved by the interest payments that preceded it. Every single person who has ever paid off significant consumer debt and redirected that payment to investing has described the same experience. It feels like getting a raise, because mathematically it is. Here is the single most important thing I want you to carry out of this video. The gap between the top 10% and everyone else is almost entirely behavioral. It is not a gap in intelligence. It is not a gap in luck or timing or the family you were born into, though those things matter at the extremes. For the vast majority of people in the middle of the income distribution, the gap between ending up in the top 10% and ending up wherever the default leads is explained almost entirely by 7 behaviors applied consistently over a long period of time. Automate your investments before you spend. Choose assets over liabilities in major purchases. Negotiate everything without apology. Maximize your tax-advantaged accounts before touching taxable ones. Grow your income aggressively rather than just cutting expenses. Maintain a real emergency fund that protects your investments during market downturns. And eliminate high-interest debt before you try to build wealth alongside it. None of these require a financial advisor. None of them require a high income to start. None of them require timing the market, picking the right stock, or getting lucky. They require making decisions that most people know they should make and then actually making them instead of leaving them as things you will get to eventually. The neighborhood. I described it at the beginning of this video, where some people end up wealthy and some people end up working forever on the same starting line. The dividing line runs directly through these 7 behaviors, not through income, not through luck, through this.